Thank you, Patty. That was a humbling introduction, certainly, and thank you to Sailing Heels for having me along tonight. Obviously, an amazing mission, with the patients and the caregivers, getting a firsthand experience, which makes it, very unique when you compare it to some of the other, fundraising and charity events in the sailing world. So privileged, certainly, to be a part of it. And I guess I'd be remiss not to thank Tito's as well. As a client, I can say they got pretty good stuff. But Patty talked a little bit about my personal sailing journey. It started out right here. I'm in Barrington, Rhode Island right now. I grew up in Bristol, Rhode Island. My grandfather was obviously a prominent boat builder, and I started sailing off the dock, and then learned to sail in Narragansett Bay and started competing interscholastically and then internationally. And the big break for me and my partner Mark was the Morning Light project, Patty, that you referenced, which kind of chronicled the journey of a couple young adults sailing from Los Angeles, California to Honolulu, Hawaii, as part of the Transpac race. And that's really where our ocean race dream began. That's where I met Mark and convinced him to come matriculate at Brown University and kind of join me there as part of the sailing team, but more to continue our friendship and to pursue this dream. I mean, we worked really, really hard to get to the start line in this race. And, to some extent you make your own luck and you need to get some breaks here and there, but, it's not something that happens just overnight. You got to work really hard, and it's not clear, what's more difficult, getting to the start line of the race with your own team or just completing the round the world journey. And, that's certainly not lost on us. We know that it's much more than a sailing race. We know that it's a great platform for spreading a message. It's a good platform for corporate hospitality, global business-to-business engagement. But we do it because we're passionate sailors. We're lucky enough to go around the world with Team Alpha Medica in 2014-15, which was a Turkish-based medical device company. And then the second go-round was with Vestas, which is kind of the worldwide leader in wind energy, but also 11th Hour Racing. 11th Hour Racing is an amazing sponsor, and they've continued with us here in our quest for our third round the world mission. And the objectives this time around are clear. It's to win the race first and foremost, but to do so in a sustainable way, and to essentially show the world that being a top level competitive sports team is not a compromise, and that essentially we can lead by example and we can move the needle in this space, with the race itself as an organization, to kind of set the standard as a team, but also to help part of our industry, the boat building industry, the maritime industry, enhance their practices such that they're more sustainable in what they do. 11th Hour Racing is a very unique organization. It tries to promote sustainable practices in the sport of sailing, but also champion the cause of ocean health by amplifying the message of its ambassadors and its grantees. And, sustainability is a massive part of everything we do. We have like a rubric, which is, performance, sustainability, cost, time. It factors into every single decision that we make as a team. We have a sustainability policy, which stems from the sustainability report that we produced from our last go round. And, the only way to get better is to measure. And so we measured our carbon footprint in the last race, which we willingly offset. And now the goal is to minimize it this next go round, which has its challenges certainly, because in this edition we'll be building a new boat, and in previous editions we were supplied a one design boat. So it's a difficult mission, but one that we take on because we're so passionate about the subject matter. And I think it's just a really beautiful thing when your passion aligns with that of your sponsor. And we couldn't be luckier than to be partnered with 11th Hour Racing. As I alluded to, the boats that we're going to be sailing this go round are different, certainly, than the ones that we've sailed in the past. In the past, it's been for us at least, the Volvo Ocean 65, which is a one design platform, supplied boat. So the only difference is, in theory, the sailors, and it's not the technological battle. It's not the arms race, if you will. And as a way to move forward, the organization chose to partner with the AMOCA 60 class, which is a primarily, at this point in time, even though the I stands for international, a French class. And the boats were originally designed to be sailed short-handed, either single or double-handed. And we're going to be sailing them in a crewed configuration. It'll either be 4 or 5 crew, depending upon what they decide for the final rule. It'll be a mixed crew. So it'll have males and females aboard, which actually, if you think about it, is nothing new for me and nothing new for Mark. I mean, a lot of the sailing that we've done previously, both with, Morning Light, and then later we did something called the All-American Offshore Team. We've always sailed with mixed crew, and in Volvo races of past, we've done the same. So I think the way that they've chose to include women is great, because it's not mandated, it's incentivized. And, for us, we think it's a great way to move the sport as a whole forward. I talked about the custom nature of these boats. You can see it here in this slide, flying through the air. They got hydrofoils that stick out the side. They reach speeds of up to 40 miles an hour. They can get very uncomfortable at times. You can see they have canted keels. It's tough to see totally in this picture. There are better pictures on the internet, I'm sure. But the other way that it gets its flight is from the canted keel, which you can see the orange bit just under the boat there. It cants essentially 40 degrees, in either direction. The boats are very light. They're made entirely of carbon fiber. They're 7.5 ton on average, which is a lot to pick up out of the water when you think of it flying across an ocean. But compared to other 60-foot sailboats, it's actually it's quite light. One of the big challenges for us is just the sheer volume. The boats are designed for single and double-handed sailing, and now we're going to have 4 or 5 people living on board. I guess 5 or 6 when you include the onboard reporter, who's not a active performance participant in the team, but someone that still needs to eat and sleep and live somewhere nonetheless. So yeah, it's the first time that they're going to be sailed crewed. It presents a lot of design and layout challenges for us as a team. And, we look forward to those. Honestly, we couldn't have done what we've done to date without the one design format and having it kind of simplified for us as we started our careers. But we definitely feel like we're ready to take the next step and, the next level of complexity, you might say. And the AMOCA 60 definitely brings that, and we're relishing the opportunity. So, talking about life on board, I alluded to the fact that it can be pretty uncomfortable. The boats go really fast. The waves are out of control, and it's one thing to surf them. It's another thing to slam into them or to touch down. When we're flying around, we obviously don't fly all the way around the world. It's an intermittent phenomenon. So when we do come back to Earth, so to speak, it can be a pretty surprising sensation. You can see me there in that picture there, just trying to make a coffee. Some of the things that you take for granted every day are a lot more difficult on board a boat that's doing, 30 to 35 knots. You can see the sleeping arrangements there are, you might say, less than desirable. It's really hard to get sleep. We live our lives in these 4-hour increments as part of a watch system. So you're kind of 4 hours on, 4 hours off, but you never really get, it sounds kind of luxurious, right? So you get 12 hours off a day, but that's not really how it works, because during those 12 hours, there's an inevitable sail change or rain squall, or, you're called upon to do something. With only 4 people on board, it takes everybody to do basically anything. Your sleep patterns are quite frequently disrupted. But, even in your downtime, you need to sleep. You need to take care of your personal hygiene. So, on average, I would say I sleep somewhere around 5 hours a day, in 2 to 3 increments or something like that. The food situation is not great. We eat freeze-dried food because it's preserved, it can't go bad. And also because it's very light, we only have the ability to boil water essentially in the galley. So, that's what we do. We boil the water, we dump it in, we mix it up, and that's what we got. And, some meals definitely taste better than others, but from a texture standpoint, they definitely all kind of feel the same. So, when I do get to land, what I crave most of all, even though it kind of seems strange, is fresh fruit and vegetables, because it's just stuff that you can't get out there. So, I know the theme of this talk is thriving in the calm and in the storm, and the ocean race is a great example of that. A much better example, I'd say, than even the Vendée Globe, which is a single-handed, nonstop race around the world. Because in those nonstop races around the world, you end up just kind of racing to the Southern Ocean and then sailing around the bottom of the planet and then coming back up once. And we cross the equator multiple times, which means we're exposed to a much bigger variety of conditions. And, because this race stops 10 times, we're forced to go in and out of port, which create different, weather challenges, so to speak. But sometimes it can be just as difficult and just as frustrating to sail in the calm as it is to sail in a storm. Sometimes it's harder to focus. You have to work for every single inch, and you're talking about inches instead of miles. Here are some pictures of us in the doldrums, and you can see it's hot, it's no wind. You can see us on the right there praying to God that we have some breeze over the horizon, because all you need is an inch and it can turn into a mile, which can turn into 10 miles, which can turn into 100 miles. So you really have to keep that laser focus and that intensity, even when the weather is down and the conditions aren't, intense, so to speak. So, and with the storms, it's definitely a little bit more obvious. You got to rise to the occasion. The intensity is brought on by the weather itself. Here's probably my favorite picture in all of sailing, in my humble opinion, the best picture taken in sailing in the last 25 years. But this is us during our first campaign, rounding Cape Horn, an iconic landmark for all offshore sailors. It's, the Everest of sailing, if you will. I mean, fewer people have rounded Cape Horn in a sailboat than have actually summited Everest, which is an unbelievable statistic to me. But having been down there and knowing how hard it is, it doesn't surprise me. This was on a leg from Auckland, New Zealand to Itajaí, Brazil. It's I think it's it's so funny that, thousands of miles become rounding errors for me now, but I think it's a 6,000 or 7,000 mile leg, which takes you past what's called Point Nemo, which is actually the furthest point in the world from land. And it really provides perspective, because I always struggle when I'm out there. The fact that I can sail around the world in a sailboat like this, I mean, does that mean that the world is big because it takes so long, or does it mean that the world is small because we can do it all by ourselves? I get so lost on that. But when you are at Point Nemo, it's important to point out that the closest person to you, other than your competitors, is the person that's orbiting the planet in the space station. And, if your boat breaks, they're not going to be the ones to help you. So it gives you a healthy respect for your competitors. It's definitely different to be sailing as part of a race. When you're down there in that part of the world, to have the safety in numbers is much different than just, people that sail around the world or attempt to sail around the world setting records. When you're out there alone, it's definitely a different experience. And, I think that is very much in line with the message of Sailing Heals. I mean, we're all in this together, and it takes a team, to get through a lot of these adverse moments, not only, the team that we have on the boat, but our greater team, the ocean race family. We get to know each other. We kiss our kids when we leave the dock, they kiss their kids when they leave the dock, and we're fiercely competitive on the water. But, once we get in, there's a lot of mutual respect, I'd say more so than a lot of other sports. So, very different story next time around when we got to Cape Horn. We led the fleet in our first race, in that picture that you could see. As one of the younger teams in the race, it's a moment that's usually reserved for a team of grizzled veterans, but as kind of the young guns, we took it down, which was great. And then after, you know, a lot of adversity in a second race, we got our boat back on the water, and we're having another strong leg in the Southern Ocean, routed Cape Horn in second place. And then, you know, 100 miles after we did that, our mast fell out of the sky. It was a pretty difficult experience for us as a team. I remember being down below in my bunk, and conditions that were certainly benign compared to what we'd experienced in the last, you know, week and a half. It was probably 18 to 22 knots, blasting along at, you know, 16, 17 knots, something like that. And all of a sudden there was a loud bang, and I felt the boat instinctively roll in the wrong direction. The mast fell over the side. Lucky for us, everybody was okay. It was a big job to preserve what we could, what was left over, and to try to make sure that you know, nobody was injured in the process, and that the mast that was hanging off the boat didn't create more damage to the hull itself, swing back into the boat, puncture a hole, and, you know, create a water compromising situation. So, you know, it's tough, and it's tough as the leader of the team to make sure that everybody's on the same page and marching in the right direction, and that they have their wits about them. You know, and then, you know, once we kind of stabilize the situation, you know, there's always the what's next, you know, now that the immediacy has subsided, what's the plan? And for us, we were fortunately only 100 miles from the Falkland Islands, and we had enough fuel aboard to motor there. So that's what we did. And then, you know, the adventure never ends. Once we got there, we were presented with another challenge, which was, what do we do? You know, Mark and I, as leaders of the team, had a very tough call. We ended up flying off the island and leaving the team so that we could run, you know, the communications for the rescue and recovery, and to liaise with our sponsors and our bosses. But it was a tough call, and I'm not sure to this day whether we made the right one. And it's something that, you know, I got to live with. But the story did have a happy ending. I can say that. But, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. But, you know, you're just faced with these challenges every day, whether it's on the water or in the office. You know, it's a big chunk that we bit off here, and it's got a lot of different heads. And depending upon what we're addressing, we got to wear different hats every day. You know, you can see here in the top left of the slide that we were able to, I say we, the guys that were still in the Falkland Islands, were able to jury rig a makeshift mast with an old lamp post, and borrowed a mainsail from an expedition vessel and recut it on a sewing machine that was built for garments. And, you know, we took our storm jib and used it as kind of like a Yankee or a fisherman's staysail or a golly wobbler or something they had in the 1500s. And we turned all the water ballast tanks into diesel tanks so that we could get increased range, because we had another 1,500 miles to go to get the boat from the Falkland Islands back to Itajaí. The delivery crew was able to do that successfully, so that the rest of the sailing team could get a little rest before we started our next leg into Newport, Rhode Island. A leg that is very important to me personally, because it's a homecoming of sorts, but also very important to 11th Hour. 11th Hour Racing is based in Newport, and we got into Brazil just a day before we had to depart on this next leg. And it was a Herculean effort by everyone, really. The short team, the sailors, our sponsors, to create a scenario that even gave us a chance to get back into the race. And we were able to start with the fleet miraculously on time, and you know, posted another podium result into Newport, which was a real reward for a team that had put in a lot of hard work and been through you know, a lot of adversity. And you know, I think that's important to point out, is that you know, just like in life, very much in the ocean race, there's a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And some days you're on the podium, and some days you're dismasted in the Southern Ocean, you know. And I think it provides amazing perspective, you know, just in the way that I live my life every day. You know, sometimes I don't want to say you get numb to the highs and lows, but you get this, you know, philosophy, I guess. You know, we always like to say that you can't get too high and you can't get too low, and you got to kind of ride the averages over time. And that's the way that we try to get with our planning and with our emotions. And it's something that we preach to all of our sailors, but our team as a whole. You know, I think we've created, you know, at least the last 2 times, and hopefully here in our third effort, a good team culture, one of transparency and openness. And, you know, I think that you can't get too excited, you can't get too emotional, and you just got to live, especially in the times that we live in now, you know, day by day. You know, we're starting a training session here in just a couple days, and it's a 6-week session, and we don't know where it's going to end. we ask people to fly in here to Newport, Rhode Island from all over the world, you know, which is a pretty crazy ask given the times, and something that we don't take lightly. And you know, we're operating in a safe and respectful way, which I think is important to point out. But you know, we could give a guess as to where we think this next session is going to end up, but the reality is we don't know. And that's just kind of the world that we live in, given the COVID situation. But to some extent, the world we live in just as participants in this crazy round the world adventure. So it's nothing new to us. And I think the parallels that we've actually drawn between life on board and, you know, what do you really need? You know, and I think a lot of people have found themselves asking that same question, whether it be from COVID or because of, you know, drastic changes that they've had in their life for other reasons. So, sailing around the world as a member of a team in a crazy game like this, I think prepares you for a lot of things in this world, most definitely. And that's something that we don't take lightly. You know, the other thing to point out, I think, is that I've talked a lot about the competitive aspects, excuse me, of this campaign. And that's certainly one of the, excuse me, one of the, here it is, more here. It's one of the reasons that we do this is obviously the competition, right? You know, but we're all competitive people. At the end of the day, we're not playing chess or checkers. You know, we're sailing around the world. So, you know, the adventure part of it, and you know, being one with the ocean and conquering something greater than ourselves is important to all of us too. And we've been very lucky to experience some amazing sights and sounds while we're out there on the ocean, you know, and sometimes it does get lost on you. I'm not going to lie. You know, you're waiting for the next weather report. You're waiting for the next race sched, position report. You're racing the guy that you can see just over the bow. You know, meanwhile, between you and he, there's probably a pod of dolphins or, you know, some remote Pacific atoll, or you can see some of the, you know, the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, shooting stars. I mean, you name it. You can see on the right there was one night coming up into Abu Dhabi, into the Middle East, and the first race that we did, that the boat was just taken over by birds. I mean, you never know. Excuse me, scratchy throat. What it's going to be out there, and I think that you know, especially with the relationship that we have with 11th Hour Racing, it's very important that we recognize these moments and we do everything that we can to preserve these moments. And that's a quest of ours, in, you know, the betterment of ocean health. And what we say on our team is, you know, it's the ocean hour. I mean, that's our hashtag, but it's also our belief is that, you know, if we don't act now, it will be too late. So if we want to keep enjoying these things while we're on the water, you know, we have to be proactive in how we approach some of the solutions. So I think that's it for me for now. But before we get into the Q&A, I'd just like to plug the raffle here one more time. Great prizes, and obviously a great cause, and a great way to raise money. So we got a little bit more time there. So if you can get your tickets in, I guess now would be a good time to do that. And then I guess, you know, lastly, I think, Bram, you're going to turn it on, or Christy's got some questions, or we're going to find a way to type them in and fire away. I I guess the first question is.
So, hi everyone, I'm Christy. I work with Charlie on the team, so I've just been monitoring the questions here in the chat. So if you have any more, feel free to drop them in, and I'll be reading them. But Charlie, okay, so the first question we have here is if you could describe the role of the OBR, so Amory Ross and what he does for the team.
Yeah, the OBR, aside from being the most thankless job on the boat, is the onboard reporter, and it's their job to document the experience at sea. And it's a combination of survival and storytelling. It's a big part of the return on investment for sponsors, because obviously it is a large investment, and to just cast off the dock lines, watch it sail over the horizon, and not see the boat again for 30 days is pretty unacceptable. So it's their job to capture the imagery, make the videos, tell the story. And you're doing all this when the boat's going 40 knots and crashing off. I can barely watch a movie or read a book in the car. So I don't know how these guys do it. They're not allowed to directly contribute to the performance of the boat. But I guess in some ways they can indirectly by helping us make food, helping build a boat, generally being good citizens, being positive contributors to the team, not detracting. I mentioned Amory before. Amory Ross is a very good friend of mine. I mean, we've been through thick and thin. He was our OBR in the Alpha Medica race, and will be our OBR in this next race. Just an amazing talent, a good man, in my opinion, the best in the business. I know I'm biased, but I'm sure you'll hear a lot of people say the same.
So the next question that we have is, do we use solar power on the boat?
We do. And actually, one of the things as 11th Hour Racing that we have mandated with the organization is that you make a certain percentage of your power on any given leg through renewable sources as a way to limit fossil fuel on board. We would like, and I think the shorthanded guys are going to go to fully renewable sources, but it's a little bit of a safety thing for us sailing around with a crew. If a single-handed person falls overboard, whether or not the engine's powerful enough to go back and get them does not matter, because it will not obviously be operated by a ghost. And in our case, the man overboard situation is real. So we do need fossil fuel at this point in time. We hope to move the needle down the road to get back to that person. So the rule as it currently reads is 30% renewable power from renewable sources in any given leg. And we get that from solar and from hydro. So we have a hydro generator that we drag behind the boat, which creates a little drag, but produces heaps of power. And it's super efficient. And 30%, I think it's worth pointing out, is the minimum. And we have some ways as a team that we think we can produce well in excess of that and reduce the amount of fossil fuel that we have on board, because there's a weight penalty to that. So we need enough to be safe, but certainly no more. Good question.
All right, so another one that we have here is if you can talk about what leadership skills are critical and motivational for you and your crew during some of those moments of adversity that you talked about.
That's a good question. You can read a lot of books on leadership, certainly, but I think the only way to learn in anything is through experience. I'm a student of the game. I certainly do my fair share of reading about the subject matter, but things that are most important to me are leading by example. And you can only do that if you have the respect of your teammates, and that's day in, day out, the way that you carry yourself. It's being the first one there, it's being the last one to leave, it's putting in the hard yards, it's coming from a logical place, understanding them and where they're coming from. We try to create an inclusive, transparent environment where everyone's opinion is heard. But at the end of the day, it's tough because it's not a democracy. You got 4 people on the boat. If 4 people want to do different things, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. And that's not something that is lost on me. I think you got to be confident, but you have to be respectful of other people's opinions. And it can be difficult at times. I struggle personally with the line between leadership and friendship, especially once you've been through so much with these people. It can be it can be tough at times. And sometimes you feel like you're on an island, but sometimes it's important you put yourself there so that you can separate emotion from the situation and do what's best for the team. Because at the end of the day, you're not always going to please everybody.
What's that say right there?
You got to be okay with that.
No tickets. I don't want to buy tickets for that. I don't want to.
Someone's buying raffle tickets.
Okay, and then another one we have here is if you can comment on any close calls that you've had with larger than life sea life, and maybe some of the technology that we're incorporating into this campaign to help mitigate any type of marine strikes.
That's a good question. The question is about what we've seen at sea as far as marine life and any close calls that we've had. We've seen everything at sea, from whales to whale sharks to dolphins to tortoises to seals, sea lions, albatross, you name it. If it's out there, if it's in a video, we've seen it. We've had some close calls. We've had some impacts, which is something we always try to avoid, but it's important that when you have one, you report it so that we can continue with the mapping of wildlife species around the world. But it's also worth pointing out that we have a collision avoidance system on board. It's called the Oscar system. It's at the top of the mast. It's a camera, but also has infrared ability to detect objects in front of us. And there's kind of two phases to the Oscar. One, it's an artificial intelligence, machine learning, picture taking, object recognizing system. So even in its infancy, just having it up there and having it take millions and millions and millions of fragmented pictures of the ocean is helping them develop their product over time. Identification is the first stage, and then eventually with some of these boats with autopilots, automatic avoidance would be the next step, and they're working on that right now. But it's been a healthy partnership with us thus far, and it's something that's definitely important to us, because if you hit something and break the boat, you ain't gonna win.
All right, great. And then another one that we have here is from Lucinda, and she is wondering if you can expand a little bit more on the details of the race. So how many boats typically participate? How often does the race happen? And how long does it typically take?
Great questions. A little bit more about the ocean race in general. It's about 45,000 miles. It stops in 10 different places. It touches every continent but Antarctica, and even then you get pretty close. In the past couple races I've done have had 7 different teams, and it's a 9-month endeavor. It starts in October of 22, and it should conclude in January of 23. And then it's essentially will be, I should say, every 2 years after that. So the following race will start in I think 26, or 4 years, I should say, 26, and then the next is in 30. So I did the 14-15 race and the 17-18 race, now 22-23, and then 26-27, 30-31, pretty sure.
All right, great. So the next one is, can you talk a little bit about the shore team? Who are they and what is their function?
The shore team is probably the most valuable part of our team. You can think about it as the pit crew in a NASCAR race. I mean, they make sure the boat is prepared, it's ready to go. The boat is your weapon. I mean, you want to go to war with the best possible stuff. And they're in charge of the mast, the rigging, the foils, the sails, launching, hauling, washing, servicing, maintaining, absolutely everything. It's the behind the scenes, often underappreciated, but most important part of the campaign. So we have a shore team that's, I think, 8 strong, something like that. It starts with a shore team manager, a boat captain, and then we have jobs that are a little bit more specific. We have riggers, sailmakers, systems engineers, hydraulic specialists, you name it. Every aspect of the boat needs to be cared for, and we got a team of people doing that. But then I think it's important to also point out that we have sailors on board that specialize in all of these areas too. You know, when we're out there sailing, it's not like we can just call the shore team to come in and fix our problems. We got to know how to do it ourselves. Just roadside assistance, AAA, you know, that's not really how it works. So we need to be versed in all the systems on the boat. You know, a lot of people ask, how do you get into this race? You know, I'm just sailing, a college sailing, I'm doing all this stuff. You got to be more than just a sailor. You got to be a good teammate. You got to be a good technician. You know, you got to learn the hands-on vocational human capital type skills, you know, whether it's sail making or winch maintenance or being a doctor, a medic, you know, I mean, it's no matter what, you need to do all these things when you're at sea. So the more skills you have, the more likely a candidate you are.
I'll read it back to you.
All right. So we have a question from Kevin and Gerard. Does every team all have different weather routers?
That's a good question. There's a bunch of different software programs that help us optimize our routing through the ocean. And essentially there's two components to the routing process. There's the boat performance data that we call a polar. So how fast is the boat expected to go at any given angle or wind speed? And that gets coupled with a grid file, which is a prediction for future weather. So essentially, there are algorithmic programs. There's 3 or 4 very popular ones, Expedition and Adrena being the ones that we use primarily on board. One's invented by an Australian guy, another a French guy. And you basically say, these are the performance polars of my boat. This is the weather that we downloaded from the satellite, and there's a gazillion different models. There's a GFS American model, EC European model, and derivations of them, depending upon where you are in the world. And then it's your job to observe what's in front of you versus what's been forecast. And then obviously everybody's polars or boat performances are different. And on board, we only get the same weather that all our competitors get, but certainly in the background before we depart, we're working with our own meteorology team and coming up, you know, with our performance team, you know, we're building our polars. So it's a pretty sophisticated process. In the last race, the boats were the same. So you saw us kind of following each other all over the world. And that's no coincidence because we had one design boats and the same weather files. But I think in this next race with big differences in the boat, you know, I think certain boats are going to like different conditions, and you'll see us kind of spearing off a little bit more.
All right, and then one from Drew here. How did you meet and arrange your sailing crew?
Sailing is a lot like, you know, other professional sports where, you know, today's competitor could be tomorrow's teammate. You know, you end up spending a lot of time with, for better or worse, you know, the same groups of people because you kind of reach the, you know, the top end of the sport. It's a lot of familiar faces, and you know, you sail with them all in different contexts. You know, between races, we continue sailing professionally, you know, around the world, and we build crews of all different types of people. So whether it's through past ocean races or reputation in the America's Cup, the Olympics, other offshore events, you know, that's typically where you meet these psychopaths. And like I said, you know, you're looking for people that are good sailors, but also good teammates, and at the end of the day, bring something else to the table, and, you know, have a pedigree in a winning record.
We've got a few more here. You guys are asking some awesome questions, so keep them coming. One we have here is, how do you deal with medical emergencies? Is the team trained or medically trained at all?
That's a good question. Sensitive one. In theory, yes, we are all trained medically, some more so than others. I mean, you know, I am not very medically minded, and I don't know how I do sailing around the world myself. You know, I've gone to the classes, I've, you know, stitched up a chicken breast, but that doesn't make me a surgeon, you know? So having people that know what they're doing on board is important to me personally, because it's not an area of expertise, so to speak. But we have everything imaginable on board on our med kits, from UV fluids to antibiotics to, steroids, you name it, intense painkillers, anything can happen out there. And there's no one there that's going to be able to do it for you. I mean, we can video call, essentially. We have emergency numbers with doctors where we can put a camera on the patient and they can talk us through, maneuvers here and there. I just recently did a race from France to Brazil, where, of all things, I spilt some boiling water on my leg, the English Channel, and then 8 days later, going through the doldrums across the equator in some pretty hot, humid, manky conditions, it got infected. And 2 days out of Brazil, I couldn't even fit my foot into a boot because I'd gotten a bacterial infection. And fortunately, we had the right meds on board, but it's always something. Sometimes the smallest nagging little problem that would go away on land, festers in the ocean and becomes a bigger deal than what otherwise.
Okay. And then we've got a little bit of a personal one here. So from Christine, congratulations, Rhode Island loves you. Looking 10 years down, what do you hope to do once you retire?
Once I retire? That's like asking what I want to be when I grow up. I'm just trying not to. I've never been much of a long-term planner. The goal continues to be, win this crazy race. And, if we're fortunate enough to do so, would I stop? I don't know. I don't know how to do much else. I love it. I will say I'm getting older, definitely. It's taken a toll on my body, and one of my biggest attributes has been my availability. I guess over time I've been able to stay on the water and healthy and fit, but definitely it's different than it was 10 years ago for me. And it's tough to say. I mean, I really enjoy the work that I'm doing with 11th Hour Racing. On the shore side, on the sustainability side, working with nonprofits and some of the grantees, and very passionate about the ocean health element of our campaign. And that definitely takes less of a toll on your body physically. My kids are younger, but growing up, we've always been able to just kind of rip them around the world and get the passport stamped at no opportunity cost. And now there's school and their lives and their friends. So, the plan's always been no plan, play it as it lies. And, there's a lot that I'm interested in, but short-term focus is definitely this team and this race.
All right. And then on that end, so you kind of talked about a little bit, or you talked about how much you love to sail. Where's your favorite quote unquote normal place to go sailing? Normal place.
It's a cop-out answer, but Narragansett Bay, we're just so lucky to live where we live in this, maritime mecca. We went training just the other day and, put a couple sails up and bombed out to Cuttyhunk at 25 knots and sailed back into Narragansett Bay as the sun was setting, and, doing 20 knots right into the harbor, furling the J2, in the shadow of Fort Adams, and just, being able to do what I love, which is now my profession, in a place that I learned to do it. I got to pinch myself, on my drive home every day, sleep in my own bed and be able to do this. It's, why leave?
Good answer. And then one here from Gloriana Doyle. Is the boat always fast enough to avoid weather too rough for sailing, or do you ever use storm tactics like a drogue, like cruising sailors typically would?
Interesting question. It used to be that you'd start in one place, aim at the other, and you'd get run over by all the weather systems that came. And boats weren't, nimble enough to react. Our boats are obviously quite quick. And to some extent, we are storm chasers. We can get out in front of weather systems, hook onto them, and we can take one low pressure system across the Atlantic Ocean in 6 days, and that's us. We're in the same conditions the entire time. And you guys are all sailors. You know how the low pressure systems work. Generally windier at the center of these things, and we can kind of find our way between the ISO bars and pick our wind speed a little bit. The boats, believe it or not, don't always go faster when you introduce more wind. Anything over 30 knots is kind of like, I don't want to say survival, but you get diminishing returns when it comes to performance. So if we could sail in 20 to 25 knots in flat water all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, we'd do that. So that's what we're looking for.
Very nice. One here, another one from Kevin. How are the team's old sails recycled? Carbon sails seem pretty tough to get rid of.
Carbon sails are tough to get rid of. We reuse ours. We donate them to something called the Mariposa Project, and they get sent down to the Dominican Republic, and they get turned into bags, and they get sent back to the United States, in the form of handbags, duffel bags, you name it. The actual physical breakdown of the sails is quite difficult. We're working with a company called Ambercycle out of California to try to separate. Our sails aren't actually made of carbon fiber. There's a race rule that prohibits that from being the case for 2 reasons. One, to try to minimize our carbon footprint, but also because it's difficult for the satellite communication systems to project through carbon. So they're actually made of aramid and Dyneema. But as you're aware, one of the biggest problems with recycling is the complexity in the construction. So isolating the materials can be very difficult, but we're working with a company in California called Ambercycle to try to improve that process.
Great. And then I think one here.
Oops. Sorry.
Sorry, just.
Sorry about that.
And then I think one here that is would be a nice one to end on, because it looks like Bram's all ready to start the announcement of the raffle prizes, is how would you like your team to be remembered?
Well, I guess I started out by saying we had 2 goals. One was to win the ocean race, and the second was to do it in the most sustainable way possible. So I think winners that didn't compromise in our mission. I think that's the biggest one. And if we can, lead by example and set the standard for campaigns moving forward, not only in our results but the way that we operate, that would be the most important to me. So I guess that's it for me. So is it Bram now?
Who's going to take over? But in the meantime, can I just thank Charlie for a really exciting, engaging, and interesting chat. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience and your memories. And it was terrific. So thank you.
Thank you guys again for having me.
Yeah, and Charlie, I want to thank you too, and thank everybody for tuning in. Please stay with us a few more minutes if you're just interested to see who won or if you won. But Charlie, that was fascinating, and I don't think a lot of us are experienced sailors. There are definitely a few dozen on the call, but a lot of us aren't nearly as experienced in terms of just what international sailing is all about. So you opened up our eyes so much, and your analogies were fantastic. And I think the questions were just so interesting too. So great job with everybody's insights and just curiosity. So thank you, and best of luck to the 11th Hour team. Thank you so much for your support. And thanks to Christy.
Christy too, yeah.
Your internal team has been wonderful too. So we're gonna this has been recorded, and we'll edit it a little bit and get this shared so we can support you on your travels. And we're so grateful for you supporting the mission of Sailing Heals and thinking about the larger climate in general with your work. So that's beautiful stuff. With that in mind, I'm going to hand it back to Bram If that sounds good to everybody, because I know we got a few basketball games on tonight. Everybody's got stuff to do, but we really want to know who won the raffle. And we are over goal for our raffle sales. So Brownie, maybe you can tell us about that too, and then we'll find out who the winners are. And thank everybody for bidding. We really appreciate your support.
Thank you, Charlie, and good luck to your team.
Well, thanks, Ken.
All right. Thanks so much, Charlie. That was amazing. Yeah, so 3 weeks ago, we started this raffle. We set a goal of around $5,000. We're almost at $6,300, so we've exceeded our goal, which is a huge deal. Obviously, right now, normally we'd be out sailing this whole entire summer, but, you know, this is one of the ways that we're able to stay alive as an organization. So to everyone that donated, we really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for helping us tack towards your 10 being able to continue sailing heels, because it really wouldn't be possible without events like this. But let's get into the juicy stuff, because we announced the raffle winners now. All right. So I'm just going to run through. If you guys want to hop off, Charlie's done speaking. Again, that was amazing. But if you bid on something and you'd like to stay, feel free. All right. So congratulations to Mary Walsh for the Gloucester Luxury Hotel Classic Yacht Package. Karen and Andy Rhodes won the Newport Cocktail Cruise Destination Package. Jane House won the Encore Overnight Package. Kevin McCarthy won the Salem, Massachusetts Wine and Dine Overnight Package. Tran30 at yahoo.com won the BMW scooter. Ron Hallam won the delicious Sailing Heels cookies. Sure. Udi Karam won the 11th Hour Racing Homecoming Package. So that's actually in a few days, and you'll be able to go with 11th Hour and kind of get a VIP experience with them and a little bit behind the scenes for when they come in off the boat, which would be awesome. All right. Kathleen Sullivan won the $100 gift card to Tuscan Kitchen. Nancy Chabot won the $50 gift card to CK Pearl. Paula Lucio won the $100 American Express gift card. We had a couple of these, so I'm going to go through these. Congratulations to Catherine Doherty, one of our fantastic volunteers, for winning the $100 American Express gift card as well. Andrew Dearborn, a board member of ours, won the $50 American Express gift card. Lori Bishop, who actually had my job previously, shout out Lori, won the $100 gift card to Tuscan Kitchen. All right. Michelle Gallagher, Trisha's twin, won the Sailing Heels Bergie. We had a couple of these. So Stephanie Taylor won the other one. Ron Hallam won the Sailing Heels towel. Susan Bragdon won the other Sailing Heels towel. Deborah Lee won the custom carved wooden fish by Dave Barber, who's a local artist up here. Really, really good stuff. Nancy Chabot won the Newport B&B Classic Car Package. Pamela O'Connor won the Sailing Heels Safe and Sweet Dreams Package. Lori Bishop won the West Marines Flotation Aid. And Trisha, you actually won the 15 Beacon Super Sweet Romance Package. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I only did, let me just say, I only did 12 things, so I'm glad I won one. But that's wonderful.
All right. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining and tuning in today. Thank you to Charlie. Thank you to Patty for setting this up. All of our volunteers and board members, it's really much appreciated, everyone that took the time for this. And just making this small organization be able to make an impact in the local communities really means a lot. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Graham.
God bless you all.
All right.